Hello there, children of the light, beautiful beings that you are, all of us, including this old grumpy grandpa sitting here on his old sofa couch talking to the videotape. Tape, that was a long time ago, wasn't it? And here we are all the way up to Chapter 10 on Truckin with Grandpaw. Wow. And we've only just begun. Got millions of miles to go. I think we're pretty much learning to drive now and how to expand. How to catch on with what life's given you. Of course, you know, we go back to basic reasons why anybody goes into any occupation. Whether it be the garbage man, the truck driver, the warehouseman, the carpenter, the roofer, the groceryman, you know, so on and so forth. And our main reason for doing so are what we call economic. Meaning, God, we need the money, we better go to work. I'm retired now, do the work of my heart. Though I still have to do a little work on the side to keep myself alive. Doesn't seem like money goes very far anymore. Well, in fact, it never did. But it sure has taken a hold of this world. And a lot of people out there doing a lot of things they really aren't too happy with. Because personal satisfaction takes a second seat to economic necessity. The need for money so you can put a roof over your head, keep clothes on your feet, on your back, shoes on your feet. Well, maybe you can put clothes on your feet too. You do wear socks, some folks anyway. But and then keep your car running so you can get back and forth to work and then pay for that car, which is like a mini mortgage these days if you get anything very new. I like old cars myself. Those kind that just keep running and running and running. Those are good cars. And they don't cost so much. But if you're working, man, you got to have up-to-date stuff. You know, got to be able to be reliably back and forth to work now. We wouldn't want to be late, would we? Little slaves that we are. This need's all created. Can't eat in this world without money, unless you're very fortunate and have a place where you grow your own, all of it. Not many people do. And then there's the housing thing. You want to stay indoors where it's warm or cool in the summer, warm in the winter and cool in the summer? Well, babies, you got to have a house, apartment. You got to have something. And so it's said. So these series of lies, they've trapped us in to an economic slavery. Just about every person on earth. And when you think about it, it's really crazy. All of this activity, all of this noise, all of this pollution, all of this raping of our Mother Earth, and this taking of what we think is rightfully ours. Holy cow, guys. Are we steering with one oar or what? But you know, I keep telling you it ain't always going to be like this. That there's a change in the air. And not just one, but many of them. But that'll be one of the most basic and fundamental changes, because you can see it happening already. The world of finance, the world of economics, of money, you can see that it's disintegrating, that it no longer serves itself well, and therefore it's not very good service to us, its minions, its little slaves. But you gotta know, or remember, I should say, where this all came from. This whole idea of barter and trade and money. Some would have you think it hasn't been around since, like, it mainly came out this way since the Middle Ages. Horse pucky. Long ago. Now, when there were just a few people in comparison to what there are now populating the earth, there was still a means and form of exchange. And some of the very customs we practice to this day came from 6, 7, 8,000 years ago. Now that's not a lot in terms of history, but in terms of what's talked about now, what's taught in the schools and so forth, that's about it. Again, what horse pucky? Horse crap, horse manure, you know. Good fertilizer. Breaks down to nice dirt and grows really beautiful plants. Roses love it especially. If you got roses, feed them a little horse shit. They dig it. But anyway, it's been around since then. And because it's been around so long, nobody seems to question it. Everybody, a lot of folks have problems with it, you know, because it's such an unfair and inequitous system. And, you know, favors the hoarders as opposed to those that don't hoard, you know. Favors the greedy as opposed to the needy. I mean, it's just not a very smart system. So yeah, there's been those of us that have been opposed to it just on a 3D basis, an earthly basis, you know. It's not fair. Shouldn't be this way. Credit rating my ass. But you got to think about where this all came from. And when you do, you're going to see why there's hope, why there's light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm going to be telling you a few stories here, interwoven with others, about the history of this Mother Earth. And these are just stories, mind you. But in a way, they're designed to cue up in you memories, cognizant memories of how it's been. Now, you may say to yourself, how in the heck can I know anything beyond, you know, my diaper stage in this lifetime? How can I remember anything past that? I wasn't here. Well, you was. Most of us, anyway. There's a few first-timers amongst us, but most of us, we've been around the pike a time or two. And this isn't the only lifetime you live. And I don't expect anybody to have to believe that, but I'm just telling you, as I tell you these stories, you know, think of it as genetic. If you can't think of it in terms of past lives that you yourself may have lived as a different person than what you are now, just think about it in terms of what's in those genes, you know, that unknown stuff inside you. It's got your whole history in it. It's got everybody here's history in it, in your physical person. So think of it in those terms, that whatever's been lived before you, all these ancestors you have, in their blood have passed to you genetic codes that you're still living out. And in a way, that's how the programming of humanity continues. Now see, in this story I'm telling you, humanity has been through 4 different dispensations, or what we call ages. Dispensation's a better term because it has a classy ring to it. And we can get the arrogant snobs to listen up that way. You know, we use big $10 words here, dispensation. But the first, of course, was when people and creatures walked out of the Mother Ocean and became life amongst the plants, trees, and flowers, and so forth that was here already. And that was a pretty idyllic life. None of us had to, push too hard, work too hard. All we had to do was play, get used to what we called physicality, because it was different. But that was the first dispensation. And I'm not going to give them terms of years, but, maybe it's 1,000,000 years, maybe it's 10,000, I don't know, but that's, I know it's more than 10,000, but anyway. Because there wasn't time like it is now. Then there wasn't day and night and sun and moon and all of that. There was just life in the garden, the garden of love, the mother's love. And it was awesome. And we were connecting beings and, learning how to live in a singular vision world. We hadn't done that before. We were like flies before that. We had eyes in every direction, man, And now here we were just looking out at one little peephole or two little peepholes, and it's like, wow. But of course we had a lot more vision than we do now. I mean, each one of these dispensations have been a step down, not a step up. The evolution is really returning to the place where we began. That's what ascension is too, or what planetary transformation is. It's returning to where we started, that idyllic state, that first dispensation, where things weren't near so crazy as they are here now. So it means we get our light bodies back too. These bodies we wear now are kind of dense by comparison. They've been densified by a factor of 10 or so, compared to where we were in that first dispensation. Now in the next dispensation, the second, there was a change precipitated by some new thought, new direction. How far can we go into this? That was the challenge. Because we knew there'd be some darkness coming in this second one, and it sure as heck showed up. But we densified a little more than we are now. And I guess that would be called the Lemurian stage, where there was, of course the Earth has changed, since then, of course. But there was a continent, supposedly where the Pacific Ocean is now. And I can't say for certain that's where it was, but I can tell you I've felt it. I've lived in an area that I feel is part of that old continent, because the energy is so different than it is anywhere else. And lots of bright spirits hang out there. And I've traveled, around this continent anyway, so I know the feel of places, And this one felt like home. Well, anyway, that was the Lemurian phase, the second phase, where, certain warlike tendencies started to show up, angers and jealousies, things like that started to show up, but they really weren't put into full practice then. I mean, it was an adjustment time. There was a worldwide civilization. We lived more in buildings then, By the way, nothing cost anything. You just did it because you loved doing it. Hadn't even thought of such a thing as working for wages or having to pay for shit. My. These were just something was inconceivable during this second dispensation, because life was still very paradisical. We got along well with the animals, the trees, the plants. We talked to everything. We communicated. We appreciated, and we created new forms of life, and just really had a rockin' good time. And then, per our agreement, there was this invasion that I think I've talked about before on another one, but just to put it briefly, one of the visions I've seen, now you understand I've been kind of visionary since I was a kid, but one of the visions I've seen, I've seen several different versions of this, but this is probably the one that stands out most in my mind, the one that seemed to have the most validity to it, or the most of earth reality in it. And in this vision, I was there, and I was this tall, bronze-colored being. Everybody looked pretty much alike. Everybody was, about the same height. Our features weren't so different as they are now, and so forth. We still had our individuality, and it was very easy, even though by outward appearances we looked pretty much the same. I mean, they were male and female, but it wasn't quite the same as that is now even, And we communicated on a different level. Actually, a much higher level than what we do now, as far as male and female. Or whatever, We're so divergent these days, it's alright. Shoot. So that was a pretty elevated life, and here I was living in it. I had this beautiful wife, very elegant, just amazing. And we lived in this kind of palatial place, and this kind of palatial city built up on top of some mountains. The lines were all smooth and rounded. There weren't squares and stuff like that. You couldn't see cracks in the walls, cracks in the floors, the streets, anywhere. And of course you moved around pretty much by foot, but you weren't always walking. You kind of floated, And there were flying machines then, They weren't exactly like jets of nowadays, which are big and stinky and kind of archaic, but smooth, quiet things that flew along through the air, Now, people traveled in those for pleasure because there was also gateways that you could, go from one place to another on Earth, and in fact could even visit other planets, other galaxies, other star realms, And there was communication back and forth with our brothers and sisters on the other side of the veil in this way. And death was pretty much unknown to us. It was a factor, but it was pretty much unknown. I mean, nobody really wore out. Nobody had to. So the expansion of population wasn't as urgent as it was when death came into play. And death came into play in this third dispensation of humanity, when there was this invasion I've talked about before. There were forces that came from the outer edges of the universe in this vision. And they lusted after the earth. They felt empty inside. They'd lived in the farther reaches too long or something. They'd come disconnected from life and began to feel like anti-life. So they were here to mess with it, destroy it, if they could. Wipe all living things from everything. And never let it start over again. That was their main intention and goal. And when they saw the children of the light monkeying around down here on Earth, when this became apparent to them through some form of communication, like I said, we traveled all over the place, so it wouldn't be too hard to pick up on, Well, they made some devious plans. They wanted to invade it, take it over, control the godchildren, and that way control life and get it to destroy itself. Something along those lines. That's pretty simplistic thinking, pretty simplistic talking, but it was something along those lines that happened there in these people's hearts and consciousness. So they came and they established themselves a base on the moon. Now this was kind of new in the sky, We hadn't really seen a moon before, but there it was, And they brought in this woman, this rather broad, husky woman, with two heads. On one side was a blonde head. That was kind of pleasant, the typical Nordic features. And on the other was a dark-haired girl with the typical Celtic features. And these two heads were talking with each other all the time and planning and scheming, but they were experts in the basis of life. It was a corruption of the mother energy, you see. Now this may be symbolic, it may be an actual person. Myself, I took it rather metaphorically at the time to represent the divided nature. But anyway, they brought this two-headed woman to the moon. And this is the vision as I saw it. And I became aware of her presence there, so I floated up there. And here she is with a great big old cauldron stirring away. I mean a big one, big black cauldron. You know, kind of what you see in the old witches movies, you know, how they stir their stuff in the black cauldron, all their little spells. Well, it was kind of, this probably where all that came from, all that kind of stuff came from, was from this two-headed woman way back when, up there on the moon, stirring up. When I looked into it, it's like genetic soup. It's like faces and forms in a not quite coherent manner, kind of floating around like in a liquid, you know, but there was all forms of life in there, you know, and she was stirring. This was like, as I was told while I was going through this was like not just on a physical level, there's spiritual genetics too. That's what we're patterned after. And so that's what she was dabbling with in those realms. And she was cooking up a little surprise for Mother Earth and her little baby godchildren. And this is what happened to Lemuria, babies, I'm telling you. Which was really worldwide. It wasn't just one place. It was everywhere. But this old two-headed mama gets her batch just right, and then she pours it out on the earth. And I just happened to be alive and living at the time, or at least whatever consciousness I was then, you know, whatever person I was then. It ain't the same person you see now, of course. And this is in a vision, too. Perhaps I was living it through someone else's eyes and feeling that it was myself. Doesn't really matter. I was personally there, we can say that, yeah. And we wake up in the morning, us people in this beautiful city in the tops of these mountains. And the person lying beside me is a little short brown woman. And I know it's the woman I went to sleep with the night before. I know it is. But we can't communicate heart to heart anymore. There's these strange things called voices coming out of us now, noise, resonance in the air that we hadn't seen or heard before. There was great difficulty in communication. And people everywhere had changed. I never got to see myself, so I don't know what I'd changed into, but obviously it was something a whole lot different than what I had been. And in general, they were all much shorter and stockier and denser. This is what the two-headed woman had brought to us. A grand experiment in duality. Holy shit. But that's where it all started, baby. And in this dream, this vision, I go walking through the city. The woman goes away. But I go out to assess the damage. You know, I'm a healer type dude. Whatever that is. I can't imagine anybody being sick in such a place, but I help people out of whatever. But anyway, that's what I do. And so I'm fairly well known there, and I'm walking around, and there is nobody I know anywhere. The streets are, what's left of them, are pretty much deserted. The city's been torn apart by a huge earthquake. There's just ruins, really. And I go to the place where the fly machines used to be, and there's a huge gorge there. The earth has just ripped herself open down thousands of feet. Amazing. And little by little, people of different types in this decimated city start to form together in groups. And somehow or another they manage to wrangle together a few flying machines, and they take off to the far ends of the earth to start over again. And this was the beginning of history of our time. It's not the fourth dispensation in which we live, it's the third. What we would call the Atlantean period. And still there was no money. No greed nor lust. But that was the beginning of it right there, when that little experience happened. There's still legends on this earth that are similar to that. But you got to understand, our real history's been extremely distorted. That's taught to us, told to us. What's come down through the ages is far different. And it's hidden and it's secret from you, and they keep trying to hide it away from you. But so I'm just kind of giving you a little overview of what you already know somewhere deep inside your bones, in your genetics. Help you keep trucking with it, because when you can see this, then you know where we've been and you know where we're going, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's been a grand experience despite, oh my God, how deep we could go into it. And we got into it a lot deeper than we ever thought we would, too. So in a moment, I'm going to take you from the third into the fourth dispensation of humanity. Talking historical past now. Again, these are just stories. Take them for what they're worth. To you personally. Doesn't really matter if they're factual. But some part of you knows they is. Oh, I love the irony. So I'll be right back here in just a minute with chapter 11, and we'll talk about the origins of money, and we'll talk about the Atlantean period. Love you guys. Catch you in a little bit.